Hi, I'm Steve Morgan, founder of Cybersecurity Ventures and editor-in-chief at Cybercrime magazine. I'm here today with Gerard Koopman, director of Cybercrime at the Internal Revenue Service. IRS criminal investigation serves the American public by investigating potential criminal violations of the Internal Revenue Code and related financial crimes in a manner that fosters confidence in the tax system and compliance with the law. To learn more about the IRS, visit irs.gov. Welcome, Jarod. Great to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me.
So before we get started, our listeners would appreciate knowing a little about your background. You earned a BS from Nazareth College of Rochester, earned numerous awards as a student athlete and varsity lacrosse player. Tell us about your academic and sports career in school.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I don't get that question too often, but so I received my accounting degree at Nazareth College in Rochester, a small school but a great school. I feel like they set me up very well for the challenges in the real world and job and my career. I was a major in accounting with dual minors in economics and finance, with then a concentration in computer information systems. And then as far as the sports side of the house, I was a three-time All-American at Nazareth on their lacrosse team. We had a really good lacrosse team during the 90s. We were national champions in the 92, 96, and 97 season. I was a captain for that team and most recently just inducted into the Hall of Fame there. So yeah, it was a great time in my life and a great school.
Exciting, Hall of Fame. So you went to work for the IRS as a special agent. This was back in 2002. You've been there now for nearly 20 years. In your current role, you're the director of cybercrime. Could you have imagined that you'd be in such an important role back when you were graduating from college? And maybe tell us about your career at the IRS and how it led up to this current position.
Yeah, appreciate it. So I think you always hope to have that type of impact when you start a career and especially one in law enforcement and government service. And I think that's also why a lot of people join government service, is for that type of impact and potential effect that they could have. My career was great. I started actually in the local office in Rochester as an agent and worked there for about 10 years before taking over as supervisor of that group. Maintaining oversight and management of the agents that are working out of the Rochester, New York office. And then from there, I started taking some progressive positions in our management chain. I was accepted into one of the three accepted in an accelerated senior leadership program. So I ended up taking positions of a senior analyst down in DC, working on identity theft and starting to get into this virtual currency realm. Before going out to Chicago as an assistant special agent in charge, and then eventually as a special agent in charge in the Detroit field office, before coming into the director of cybercrimes, and really have been in that position for the last 5 or 6 years. But all in all, that really gave me a great, well-rounded perspective of our agency and the different roles that are required to kind of oversee and manage different program areas.
So, Jarod, we asked you to join us for an interview after reading a special report published by CNBC. I know they spoke with you. And in the report, they said that the IRS has seized $1.2 billion worth of cryptocurrency this fiscal year. They're talking about 2021. And of course, it's just August now. I think the report was a month ago. Is that an exaggerated figure? Sometimes we do see exaggerated figures in the media. Or has the U.S. government really seized that much? And maybe give us a little bit of a backstory around how long this has been going on and what it means to seize cryptocurrency.
Yeah, sure. So the first question, is it understated? No, actually, that's a pretty accurate statement. In fact, if anything, it's understated because of the value of cryptocurrency and the inflation of that over the last 5-6 months. When we executed the seizure on some of the larger accounts back in the later part of 2000. Bitcoin was at a pricing where the couple of the larger accounts were right around $1 million in value, $1 billion in value for one of those accounts. With the inflation, I would put that somewhere around 2 to 3 billion at this point. But as far as an idea how long this has been going on, I mean, we've been active in this space since really about 2014, both from an investigation and from a crypto seizure component. And really, since that time, we've seen an exponential growth in not only in investigations, the complexity, but then also associated seizures related to that illicit proceed. Around 2016 and 17 timeframe, we really started to see a heavy increase, especially with the increasing in Bitcoin and other cryptos really increasing in value. And then around probably the last 3 or 4 years, our seizure dollar figures have increased from roughly 700,000 in 2019 to roughly around 137 million in 2020, and then over 1.2 billion this year in stated value, which, like I said, is likely much higher. In the term seizure, the last part of that, we are criminal investigators, so our law enforcement arm of IRS and the Treasury. So any type of seizure aspect is, a legal process that goes through the necessary court orders in order to effectuate the taking of that funds or those funds and the money that's sitting in any account or a wallet, or in this case, cryptocurrency that's associated with some type of illegal activity, whether it's the proceeds of the crime or actually involved in the criminal act itself, provides us the justification to seize accounts, and then it has to work through the legal position in order to achieve a final order of forfeiture, which again is dictated by the courts, and gives us the rights to ownership over that currency. So that's the process for seizing illicit proceeds.
Well, I ask because as cybercrime fighters and as cybersecurity professionals to an extent, you are uniquely different than anybody in the private sector. They're obviously not seizing assets. They then, go to or cooperate with law enforcement. When I was reading the CNBC report, it said that your team of IRS agents don't fit the stereotypical mold. I assume they're referring to cybersecurity professionals because you wear badges, you carry weapons, you are law enforcement. So I'm curious, what does your team look like? What types of people work on your team? What type of cyber experience do they have?
Yeah, great question. And I think, to start, our team, to me, a little biased, but, we always tout as the finest financial investigators in the world. And that really, going back 100 years in our agency has really been pivotal on being the best, investigators when it comes to any type of finance. And that includes cryptocurrency. It includes any type of traditional or non-traditional banking industry. So our team really has a wealth of knowledge when it comes to a broad spectrum of tracing components. And in cryptocurrency specifically, again, going back to 2014 and really having folks that were involved from that onset, we have some outstanding agents that have developed the skill sets to trace, make attribution, and really dive into these cases with extreme success. The biggest difference, I think, in those comments, we get a lot of relation because we are part of IRS criminal side. They tend to think of IRS as just solely the tax component, tax agency with revenue agents and revenue officers doing that similar and very important work. However, our criminal side are federal agents, special agents that are working those criminal cases associated with not only tax but money laundering and financial fraud, and that's where our hook comes in from the investigative side. Our team really spans all across the country and the world. We have, sitting on my team, we have the computer specialists. We have computer scientists, data scientists, engineers, contractor support. We have a host of federal agents and analysts all across the country, including posts overseas and international posts that provide assistance on active investigations. And then collectively, we work with all the other federal agencies because it's not one agency doing all of the work in most cases. I mean, one agency will be the primary investigating agency, which handles the bulk of those cases, but it takes a large effort and a big team to work some of these cases that are very complex. And that's where we come in to really specialize in that crypto tracing and attribution aspect.
Now, I'm curious. I'm assuming that some of your team has been with the IRS for years. Maybe other people have been recruited in. Either way, we're talking about very complex subject matter. We're talking about cryptocurrency, blockchain technology, a myriad of wallets. Where does the IRS agents get this experience? Does the IRS actually train the agents, or are you typically recruiting them in with that type of experience?
Yeah, good question. So really both, all of the above. I mean, we have some self-taught, really agents that are just have the enthusiasm and drive to excel at their job. So they do everything possible to learn the area, become involved in cases, work alongside the computer specialists and scientists to do that type of work. And then we have others that we've brought in from the outside, whether it's contractors or whether it's other analysts, or most recently, bringing on specialized positions that really have a background or a focus in this area. And then they learn from each other. It's working on these cases. We call it an embedded model, and it's one that's working extremely well for us, that putting the right folks and the right skill sets and specialized experience together just drives that ability to really elevate the know-how and the knowledge from everybody involved. And then we do a mix of training components. We have our own internal training that we've been developing and kind of refining and certainly changing, because the technology changes and constantly emerges in different aspects. But we've done a lot of internal training. We do a lot of like internal curriculum and academy type stuff for folks at all levels to grow. Then we leverage a lot of aspects from our private industry partners and take advantage of what they've done and trainings and certifications that they have. And then lastly, we try to leverage academia. I mean, folks that really this is what they do day in and day out, and studying this area and becoming involved in not only the technology, but how it affects both traditional finance, economics, and everything in between. So we want to take advantage and leverage that. We don't want to be somebody trying to set our own way when a lot of folks before us have already, established and been in this area for some going on, 20, 25 years now.
So I want to ask you, Jarod, about Silk Road, Darknet marketplace. I believe you were involved. I know that federal agents were heavily involved with the takedown that was back in 2013. Was that a tipping point, or if not, at least a big learning experience for the government, for the IRS, just understanding the sheer magnitude of what you're dealing with?
Yeah, it really was. I think, and you're right. We were heavily involved in that case, and an outstanding case. I mean, an outstanding agent that was working on that case, and that really set the precedence for our swim lane. Our focus in this area being that tracing component. It was due to that agent's work and astuteness to really trace the transactions, make attribution on the actual identity in that case, and then effectuate the arrest. But again, it was a lot of other work going on by other agencies, FBI, HSI, and others. But for us to focus on that area not only helped us kind of kickstart into this program area, but it did highlight the need that this is ever changing, and this type of activity is starting to not only grow, but to really have an impact in criminal enterprise. And I think it was right around that same time we had another similar case, Liberty Reserve, which I think was even earlier based off of the prosecution, but another similar case where it was eyes open to the first digital currency, centralized currency being utilized for criminal purposes, and understanding that technology and everything is evolving, especially when we're talking about financial sector. And that really highlighted the criminals' ability to exploit these type of technologies, and has only grown since then, as we see with a lot of our current cases.
So, some of this cyber criminal activity gets more attention than others, and it's not always the, size of the cyber crime insofar as dollars, but the figures. So, of course, Ross Ulbricht, everybody knows the Silk Road story. A major motion picture was made out of it. For people like yourself and myself, we're in this industry. We understand the magnitude of what's going on, but a lot of people who follow us, a lot of people who are watching us right now, they're not aware of just how many marketplaces are out there, of how seedy and dangerous and how much money it's costing the world on the dark web. You were involved with Alpha Bay, and I don't think a lot of people are as familiar with that. So maybe give us a little background on that.
Yeah, so I mean, Alpha Bay was another dark web, darknet marketplace that popped up years after Silk Road, and many other ones that were in between. But these marketplaces, just similar to Silk Road, will pop up, gain popularity, and that one was, many times larger than Silk Road in volume and dollar figures, and transactional volume being completed almost daily. So with that type of magnitude, we saw Alpha Bay as well as others popping up, and criminals just being redirected to these other marketplaces. And to your point, there's many of them that exist, many hundreds, and there's also several that are still dominating that type of underground world. That type of effort, that it takes to really go after some of these marketplaces, they're deploying a lot of technologies for their security to mask who they are, where they are, and how they transact. So every aspect of that becomes an extreme challenge to really place hands on the people that are behind these from the administrative side. Alpha Bay specifically, I mean, FBI was one of the leading agencies there. We again came in to assist on tracing components and help out with a lot of the other aspects. But there's been a magnitude of other cases since, and actually talking about technology and how that comes into play. I mean, as of last week, we entered a plea with another individual, Larry Harmon, who was part of Helix, and Helix was tied to Alpha Bay as part of their mixing and tumbling service that was involved. So that type of activity, where you now have a whole other ecosystem involved in the darknet marketplace solely to launder money, creates a whole other avenue for law enforcement to address and tackle, to try to stop these criminals from continuing this type of activity.
I'm curious about the prosecutions and ultimately the sentences. The founder of Silk Road, his situation was maybe a little different because there were other criminal charges involved and he's serving a life sentence. But what about the founders, the cyber criminals behind some of these other darknet marketplaces? Do you think they're getting sufficient sentences and the messages being sent out?
Yeah, I think the message is clear, and I think a lot of these sentences have been 20 years plus on a lot of these individuals, from administrators on down to major players that are involved. I'm not sure we're awaiting some of the sentences on some of these other ecosystem parts, like the mixers and tumblers and things of that nature. But the administrators, I mean, the judges are making it very clear that this type of activity is not going unnoticed, and they're handing out some hefty sentences. And with that, I mean, then you get into the marketplace themselves and what type of activity they're doing. I mean, another large case that was very publicly covered was the Welcome to Video dark market, which dealt with child exploitation, and something along that line is another element of a marketplace that is now not only a drug marketplace or doing other illegal activities, but now crossing into these other illegal activities that really the courts and the judges are swiftly acting and providing very large sentences.
So how big of a focus is cybercrime for the IRS today? You've been there for nearly 20 years. When you think back to your early days and your career, just how big is it? Because clearly the IRS is dealing with a lot.
Yes, we are, and it's an extreme large undertaking for IRS as a whole, and IRS criminal investigation specifically. I mean, I chuckle a little bit when you ask about thinking back when I started. I mean, when I started, I had a beeper as my communication device, versus our entire computers and lives living on a phone. So that type of shift over a very short period of time certainly creates a lot of challenges, both from our civil taxing agency tax component and providing guidance and policy to our criminal side, really focusing on this as an illegal activity and program area. We are heavily involved. I mean, we're expanding in personnel, we're expanding in our footprint both internationally and locally in the U.S., and then also trying to build up capabilities, whether that's tools and resources or physical manpower, because we don't see this going away. It's definitely become baked into our normal investigative components as well as our normal financial system, with a lot of different moving parts from the ecosystem. So that's the area that we need to really get a handle on.
So I have a son who's very interested in law enforcement. He's going to school for criminal justice. He's going to watch the video. I know he's going to say to me, "Dad, what's a beeper?"
Yeah, yeah, no communication, just a number that flashed up telling you to call.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing, where this has all gone. So, Jarod, how concerned are you personally about cryptocurrency going forward? I mean, even with everything the IRS is doing, you're clearly sending out, a very loud message. We hope to generate even more attention. But I've seen various reports. Some of them have said that as much as 70% of cryptocurrency transactions in this year, 2021, are for illegal activity.
Yeah, I haven't. I mean, I haven't seen, or we don't see that translate to our casework. I mean, in speaking generally from cryptocurrency as an overview. I mean, we're personally speaking. I mean, I'm highly supportive of it. I think there's a tremendous benefit to cryptocurrency, from privacy to efficiency and speed and lower transactional costs and things of that nature across the board. But with that, just as with traditional financial sector, must come the oversight to ensure a criminal activity or illicit activity doesn't happen and doesn't happen easily. So that's where, although it's a balance of security and anonymity, we have to have that oversight for anti-money laundering and KYC perspective. Otherwise, it will become the go-to place for illegal activity.
So, fighting cybercrime means having more people with more cybersecurity experience. This isn't going away, it's intensifying. It sounds like the IRS, like other federal agencies and the private sector, is bulking up. But we are in the midst of a labor shortage. There's various statistics that you can look at. CyberSeek estimates about 500,000 open positions in cybersecurity right now. Does the IRS face the same challenges as the private sector when it comes to recruiting people and especially experienced people?
Yeah, absolutely, and I would certainly say that we're probably at an even larger disadvantage, since we're government employees. We're bound by our government salary caps and certain thresholds for what we can pay individuals. So when we're simply competing with private sector and retention of talent, it's very hard to be able to retain good people for a long period of time with such a high specialized skill set. That being said, we get a tremendous amount of great people that come in, and I think there's something about, especially criminal agencies, law enforcement criminal agencies, and government employees, that they're like-minded folks that are really doing it more. They have more of that calling for the better cause, the greater cause. And I think having that impact in the world and to hold accountable these criminals, I think creates a draw of a special person. And I think that's what we really try to hold our agency and our folks to that higher level, because that's really what we offer. I mean, you can go somewhere private sector, if you're good enough, you're going to make more money. You're going to, have plenty more resources thrown at you. But, there's something that, we draw those folks that really have that internal drive. And, that's what we're hoping, to see as we continue to move forward. But it's certainly a problem. I mean, we need to, we have the demand, and we need to have more folks with that type of specialized skill set.
So we've been talking big picture, talking about, Darknet takedowns and seizures of assets. But before you go, I really want to, break things down here for the everyday person. We have a lot of people who watch our media. They're interested in cybersecurity. So you have students, you have parents and educators and the elderly. So to break this down for the everyday person, maybe you could explain just a little bit about, exactly what is cryptocurrency, because we still get that question from a lot of people. And then the other thing I'd like you to address is the taxpayer obligation, the everyday person. If you have cryptocurrency assets, those do need to be reported. Your tax preparer needs to know about them. And then I think some people would also be interested in, exactly how is cryptocurrency taxed to the taxpayer? What are their obligations? So if you have a cryptocurrency account and that's grown by some amount, if you don't actually, take any of those proceeds, is it still taxable? I'm sure all of this is published, Jarod, but if you can, just, shortcut it for us, we'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. And that's a very loaded question. It's even something as simple as what is cryptocurrency. I mean, there's the typical definition being a digital medium of exchange or a representation of value that is not backed by any government standard. So it's not backed by fiat currency or gold or anything else. And specifically speaking to cryptocurrency, that crypto part is the important one. Cryptography being a secure element to encoding or encrypting both the creation and the transactions themselves. So I know that's kind of a techie answer, but for somebody just getting into this, it's something that's just it's digitally available, so it's not physical to touch, and exists in basically, you'll hear the blockchain and cryptocurrency being two completely different things, and the blockchain just being a ledger. So in thinking of it as going back 20 years when I started, you had this paper ledger where everything was written down. That blockchain and digital ledger just keeps all the transactions that is always being done with the cryptocurrency. Gets into many other different nuances, whether there's tokens and NFTs and different cryptocurrencies, privacy coins, and a lot of things that can branch off into this. But the simplest form is just this digital asset that really exists under cryptography and can be posted to these blockchains in a secure and in a manner that can't be changed. As far as taxable responsibilities, the agency, and again, I work on the criminal side, so our civil side really dictates a lot of the policy and aspects. But from a very high level, our agency in 2014 has put out guidance and notices that really dictate that cryptocurrency will act as property, and all tax related components would apply to cryptocurrency as they do to property, general property. So what that means is that individuals need to calculate not only their property basis, their cost basis, but then when it's sold or transferred or released, there's an amount of capital gain if you sell it at a gain. That capital gain is the amount that needs to be reported on your taxes. So those type of elements can be tricky for people that have a lot of assets, a lot of crypto assets, and they're doing a lot of transacting in this. However, that being said, there's now, again, that increase of ecosystem. There's a lot of tax basis calculating software companies that can do a lot of automated processes with APIs and things of that nature to bring in the details that are needed to not only calculate your cost basis, but calculate your capital gains to make it very easy for you to report that on your tax forms. And again, going back to the tax preparers, it's also part of their responsibility as a preparer to ensure that taxpayers are understanding their obligation, asking the right questions. We've added questions on the tax form, whether you have cryptocurrency that you're transacting in, to make sure that that's being at least covered in discussion, so that individuals and law-abiding taxpayers are understanding that their obligation is to report that type of capital gain. I mean, we never try to catch people for making those honest mistakes. That's not what the criminal side does. Our criminal investigators are really pursuing those that are taking overt or covert steps to conceal, hide, and really try to get out of paying those necessary taxes.
And is there some level of tax evasion, a greater level of tax evasion going on around cryptocurrency insofar as citizens, because they perceive it to be something easier to hide?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say there's a greater evasion. I mean, it's a tricky subject. I mean, we're still doing a lot of internal work from agencies' perspective on trying to identify the good estimate of the tax gap around this, because we can understand pockets of the ecosystem, but the true nature of cryptocurrency is that there is an element of anonymity, and in that anonymity comes certain afforded privacy aspects that if criminals really want to, or just individuals want to hide themselves from potentially identifying income that they're making. There's easy ways to do it, and very hard for us to trace that or to find and make attribution. We can do it. It just takes a lot of effort and time, and that's why, from a government standpoint, we're putting more efforts into it. We're becoming more innovative and creative in the ways that we look at this and try to attack not only tax evasion but other fraud. But it's definitely a concern. I mean, you can think of it as similar to like cash, right? I mean, if somebody's operating in cash, it's very similar. They have the ability to, hide that income and not report it, and therefore the tax gap will be a certain number that's that we have to understand, not from the source, but from the outlay and industry and things of that nature. So.
Well, it was great having you with us today. I learned a lot. Before we let you go, any words you'd like to share from, the agency, from your group to, the people who are watching?
Yeah, sure. I mean, my biggest thing is, I always like to mention that government, IRS, IRSCI, we're supporters and appreciate the crypto space and everything that it entails. I get that a lot on different interviews or questions, being that, do we dislike cryptocurrency? And that's absolutely not the case. It's something that we just, again, need to monitor and be able to stop the really illegal and illicit activities from occurring. And the last thing I'll put in a plug for our agency. Our agents are doing some outstanding work. Some of the most prevalent cases that we've been involved in over the last 6-7 years have been the first of their kind. So for a small agency of around 2,000 agents nationally, and an even smaller percentage of those working cyber cases, I feel like we're punching well above our weight. So I'm really proud of everybody that's all the work that they're doing.
All right, Jarod. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you'll come back on sometime later in the year.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
I'm Steve Morgan, founder of Cybersecurity Ventures and editor-in-chief at Cybercrime magazine. Joining us today was Gerard Koopman, director of Cybercrime at the Internal Revenue Service. IRS criminal investigation serves the American public by investigating potential criminal violations of the Internal Revenue Code and related financial crimes in a manner that fosters confidence in the tax system and compliance with the law. To learn more about the IRS, visit irs.gov. You can keep up with all of our media at cybercrimemagazine.com.